Welcome to Talking Baseball. We're going to talk South Dakota high school baseball, Class A and Class B. I'm Jason Andera with Midco Sports, joined by Joel Sage, who helps us out during state tournament season, and he's going to help us out throughout the year talking baseball. Joel, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Absolutely fired up to talk about baseball with you.
Yeah, it is. Number one story, obviously, and it is almost every year is the weather, right? It's if it's not too cold, it's too windy. It's been all over the place this year. It looks like we might get some decent games in here in the next week or so, though, Joe.
I hope so because I really want to put my winter coat away. I've worn that to every game I've been to so far. The one game I didn't was Saturday when there were gusts of 70 miles an hour, I think. Probably pretty steady at about 30, but it was crazy in Brookings on Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday in Brookings, and it was everywhere. There were gusts, 60 to 70 mile per hour, and we saw a couple home runs because of it, and we saw a couple games that were super low scoring because of that as well. And then we saw some super high scoring games as well. But we'll go through the entire state talking about maybe some hot teams, some hot players, some big matchups to watch, all coming up over the next few minutes. So let's start with my power rankings, and the state rankings are a little different in baseball. These are literally the Midco Sports rankings. It's not a poll of writers or anything. And this is how we rank Class A. We start off with Roosevelt, who is still at 13-0. Joel, you know how hard it is to go undefeated. You actually accomplished that one season. Just to go half a season undefeated, it's a great start for Roosevelt, isn't it?
Yeah, Roosevelt is definitely off to a great start, and I would say that you have the rankings correct so far. We won't know for sure what the actual power rankings are until maybe May 1st or a little bit after that when the SDHSBA announces the first official list. We can kind of see who's 1, who's 16, and everything in between. But Roosevelt off to a terrific start, really finding a way to win close games. Very powerful, balanced offense. I mean, they are always working hard to extend innings and finding ways to get on base. I think their OBP is about 420, according to Coach DeYoung, and some power in the middle of the order with Marcus Phillips and Braden Byram hitting a few home runs already. Happened to see Marcus Phillips hit a grand slam in the first game of the season, so he wasted no time moving from basketball over to baseball. And then I think you really need to start looking out for Jackson Grevengood, a sophomore who's been hitting in the 3-hole, and now they've kind of moved him up to the leadoff spot, but really doing a great job of setting the table, getting on base, putting pressure on defenses.
Yeah, I counted, let's see, 8 guys are hitting 290 and above for this Roosevelt offense. Offense has been great. Pitching wise, maybe not that elite pitcher, but they've got a lot of guys who have had a great season. Ben Roosevelt, 0.38 ERA, 28 strikeouts so far. Jack Riddell has really come on strong. And then Marcus Phillips, he has gotten much more consistent this year on the mound. Last year was a little hot and cold. So far this season, opponent's batting average 105, his ERA is 0.70, and 20 strikeouts in 10 innings of work for Marcus Phillips. So pitching wise, I think they've got what it takes as well. A good balanced team in Roosevelt.
Absolutely. Those 3 are definitely the top pitchers, and they're off to a very good start.
Well, let's talk about the number 2 team, the defending champion Harrisburg Tigers. And, they had the player of the year last year who was just a junior, and Will Simmons. He has not pitched an inning yet this season, yet they're still 13-3. They lost a couple of games. They lost to Sturgis in a close one. They lost to Huron last week and split a doubleheader with them. And then they lost to Cheyenne in North Dakota. Otherwise, they've been taking care of business. What impressions do you have of this Harrisburg team that's trying to defend the title?
They're really good. I'm sure they miss Will Simmons, and they'd love to have him back, but clearly they have the depth, they have the talent, and I think it speaks volumes to what they're doing with player development. Big things happening over in Harrisburg, and I think it starts with Timon Long behind the dish and at the plate. Does a great job of handling the pitching staff. We saw that in the state tournament last year. but also really getting it done at the plate. Several home runs already this year, hitting for power and leading the team that way. And then Jack Sutton too has picked up right where he left off. So excellent hitter, doing a great job for Harrisburg.
Yeah, this team is really, they've put together an offensive show so far. 353 team average so far with 9 home runs in those 16 games. Those are numbers you don't see very often in Class A baseball, Joel. That's some power. A lot of extra base hits for this team.
Yeah, you'd be happy just to have 2 or 3 guys hitting 350 or higher, but to have the team averaging that's pretty insane. So we'll see if they can keep it up.
So you got those top 2 teams. I think most people feel like those are the teams playing the best right now. And then there's a whole group of teams. I put Brandon Valley at number 3. Their record is 9-9. You can take out the first 6 games. It's almost like preseason when they went to Kansas and lost 6 of those. So really 9-3 since April started. Did just lose on Monday night, taking on Dell Rapids, had the lead and lost that late. But I still feel like they've got the pieces to put, a state tournament type of run together. What do you think, Joe?
I agree. You have them in the right spot at 3, and I wouldn't worry about any of their losses. Coach Van Heel has them playing really well, as always. They're the only team in the state that can say they've been to the state tournament last 4 years in a row, and they're not showing any signs of letting up. Have a really good senior class. I think 8 of their 9 seniors are going to be playing college baseball somewhere next year, and then a really talented junior class. But offensively, they're led by Matt Brown, who's doing a terrific job. Nate Myers has really stepped up and is hitting for power and average. Aiden Spicer and Carson Astall kind of setting the table at the top of the order. And pitching wise, it's been Trey Shenaha. And then kind of the freshman phenom, Aiden Zur, has pitched really well for them, stepping into the varsity role and just not even blinking. He's going out there competing really well and getting them some quality innings. So they have a complete team for sure.
Yeah, I didn't know Aiden Zur was just a freshman. He's been very impressive. He's been making a few key hits as well, but on the mound, he's been one of their go-to guys.
Absolutely, and they'll get key innings from Carson Astall too. I don't know if he's been as good as he was last year, but we saw him pitch in the state tournament, and he went toe to toe with Tyler Boydum in that first game of the tournament. Really just kind of had some errors made behind him that made it difficult. But I think he went 5 or 6 innings and definitely gave Brandon Valley a chance. So he'll be back, and then they've gotten some good quality innings from Carter Labrie too, a sophomore over there in Brandon.
Yeah, a good core of players for Brandon Valley, and they've got a tough week coming ahead. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then I round out the top 5 with Yankton and Brookings. So Yankton 7-3 on the year, a big bounce back year for this team. They're a team coached by Drew Lawrence, who they don't have a lot of flash, but they've got a lot of depth and a lot of guys who know how to play baseball. And then I've got Brookings at 5-2, who played a 1-run game against Roosevelt last week, and they've done a nice job this year kind of putting it together. Jake Amon had a great performance last week against Jefferson. So you got Yankton, Brookings. I saw Huron play in person. They look like a team that, they gave Harrisburg some trouble. They've gave Roosevelt, went to 11 innings with them. So I think they're right in that mix as well. How do you see the rest of the rankings go together, Joe, for yourself?
Well, I think those are fairly accurate too, and I would start with Yankton. I think their experience from last year is really paying dividends. Coach Lawrence has his team playing well. They competed tough against Harrisburg in those 2 losses, lost 5-4 and 2-0. But if you know the last name Kampshoff and Reichen, you know almost half their starting lineup. They've got 2 Kampshoffs and 2 Reichens. Might be another one who contributes some too, but just a really good balanced team with that varsity level experience. So coming back and watching that payoff has to be gratifying to Coach Lawrence and his Bucks team.
I think another team we got to throw in the mix there, and I think you talked about him before, was Mitchell. Mitchell is off to a decent start, and I think 6-3 so far, and I think they'll maybe find their way into the mix as they do almost every year as well.
Definitely. And I didn't mean to overlook Brookings either. I know you mentioned them.
Right, right.
Bauer has them playing well as always, and their shortstop is the real deal. They'll be right there at the end. And then Mitchell, another senior led team, and it sounds like Jace Larson has been putting up video game numbers over there. And then Jonah Schmidt is every bit as advertised, and they're going to be a great team over there again for Coach Norden.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely be in the mix. Let's turn our attention to Class B right now, and here's a look at your top 5. Dell Rapids has a loss, but that loss came to Class A Lincoln. They're actually 2-1 against Class A teams this year, so that's pretty solid for Dell Rapids. Redfield area number 2, Vermilion number 3. Madison has a few losses, but again, lost 2 to Brandon Valley and lost 1 to the number 2 ranked Redfield team. And then Winter Cologne hasn't had a huge test yet, but they come in at number 5. Any comments on any of those top 5 in the Class B ranks, Joel?
Well, when I look at Class B, I think back to our conversations last year at the state tournament when we were looking at all those rosters and just looking at all 8 teams and saying, they're young. Every team had just a lot of juniors, sophomores, freshmen. I think we even saw a couple of 8th graders who made some pretty big contributions to their teams. So, all those, I could see maybe 6 of the 8 teams that made it last year make it again this year. Maybe have a couple different ones sneak in, but there's a lot of good young teams. And Dell Rapids, I did happen to go out and watch them play Brandon Valley last night at Aspen Park, another cold, windy one. But threw on the winter jacket and the stocking cap and went out there and watched a little bit of that. Brandon did play some of their occasional starters and didn't necessarily play their top players, but Dell's still competed really well. Braden Panconen came in and pitched, I think, 2 2/3 innings of shutdown baseball, and got a home run from the Mathis kid. They're good again, and it's really unfortunate that Austin Henry is out after having Tommy John surgery, but you just hope that he'll come back at some point and be able to contribute at Wichita State. But it's a bummer he's missing his senior season. I know they miss him a lot, but his brother Jack is really good. And they've got the Eastman kid who pitched in the championship game last year. I think went 6 or 7 innings and was really, really good. They've got Landon Rusink behind the dish. I think he had a couple doubles last night. So they're really, really good again, and it's going to take a heck of an effort for somebody to knock them off.
Yeah, I agree. Just watching Dell Rapids, I got to watch them Sunday against West Central, and they just have such a good cohesive team. They're going to be really tough to beat, but you nailed it. Everybody was young last year. I remember Gregory, Howard, Platte Geddes, Dakota Christian, White Lake, all those teams went to the state tournament last year and bring back a lot. Dakota Valley is another team that really could easily be ranked here. They happened to have a game against Vermilion early in the year that Vermilion won, so that kind of put them in the top 5. But watch for Dakota Valley to make it back. I think St. Thomas More is a team that's quietly doing well, and Parkston, another team that's loaded with talent. So the class, if you make the state tournament in Class B, you will have earned it. That's for sure. We'll talk more about some of those Class B teams in future episodes. But for now, let's move on to who's crushing it right now at the plate. And I'm always amazed by people who can hit in cold weather, but here's some of the top performers just over the last 7 days that we saw. Jack Henry had a 4 RBI game against Brandon Valley last night, had an inside the park home run. You mentioned Dylan Mathis and his home run. Zach Madsen came up huge for West Central against Dell Rapids. He went yard to bring them back into that game. Parker Pitts, the future NDSU baseball player, he almost hit for the cycle against Howard, so that was huge. Jack Nesgy came up, another future college player, a couple doubles, 5 RBI game. Cale Swanson also in that game. That was a game full of offense between Washington and Pierre, and those guys supplied a lot of it. Cade Kaiser came back and got a home run of his own. And then Sioux Falls Christian had a 3-for-3 performance from Caden Reitz. And Max Carlson, one of those several guys on Harrisburg who can go yard. He got on base, I think, 4 times, officially went 1 for 1 and took it deep. But a lot of guys who are able to hit the ball in the cold weather. That a little bit has to do with the bats this year, but maybe not much. Maybe you can speak more to that in the change with the bats and how much does that affect the offense?
Well, I think I speak for most people when I say that it's a welcome change. The novelty of wood bats had run its course. I mean, I think it was the right thing to do way back in 2012 for the first year of wood bats when BB core technology was just inadequate. I mean, the sound that BB core bats made when they were first produced it was just odd. And they maybe had a little bigger sweet spot than wood bats, but they weren't good. And so wood was fine for a couple of years. I think we did go to a vote and ended up getting voted down. I was shocked. I wanted to go back to wood bats, but I'm glad they've done it. And I think the technology is excellent right now, and it's good to kind of stay in line with what the colleges are doing. So as far as cold weather though, yeah, I mean it can be really difficult. You do not want to get jammed. That's one of the worst feelings in the world. Getting jammed and having that metal bat in your hands. And, I feel for those guys that have that happen to them. But yeah, and anything can happen. I mean, it's obviously you want to get out to a great start, but it's really tough to make a sound judgment on 30 at bats, or you got to wait and see kind of what happens and who have they matched up as far as pitchers. Just so many different factors, but I think the kids are enjoying it, and they would obviously like to see more games where the wind isn't blowing in
Right.
30 miles per hour. And then the other extreme too, though, is when it's blowing out at 30 miles per hour. That's always fun for a hitter, but pitchers not so much.
Yeah, it's been fun. There's been a few more home runs this year. I don't think an extraordinary amount more, but there's some guys with multiple home runs this year that we usually don't see quite as many of. Some of it's just the talent is that good, and I would suspect a little bit of it is the change in the bats as well. Let's take a look at who's been getting it done on the mounds too. And here's a list of some of the best pitching performances over the last week. Aspen Dahl of Madison. Don't sleep on this guy. He's kind of putting up MVP type of numbers. He went for a shutout against Sioux Valley with 12 strikeouts. Jack Henry, I watched him Sunday pitch against West Central, 14 strikeouts in 5 2/3. He ended up giving a couple of hits and runs up late in that game and got pulled, but still 14 strikeouts in 5 innings. That's amazing. Zach Madsen put together his own 5-inning shutout against Hanson. Caden I was going to pronounce this perfectly and I missed it. Oberbreckling, he had a no-hitter against Chamberlain. Jake Amon had the big 6-inning no earned run effort against Jefferson with 11 Ks. Keaton Rolfs had a complete game, 7-inning no earned runs against Baltic. And then a couple of combined no-hitters last week. Harrisburg got the combined no-hitter against Huron, and Brandon Valley, the combined no-hitter against O'Gorman. That one was a shortened game, but still one heck of a performance. So a lot of good pitchers to look forward to. And honestly, two of the best that we expected this year, both haven't pitched yet. We talked about it. Austin Henry and Will Simmons, who dominated as juniors and, of course, are both going big-time college programs, haven't pitched yet this year, and we've already seen some great pitching. But those are two guys we'll definitely miss seeing this spring.
Absolutely. It's good to see that their teams are still doing well, but we definitely miss them, and their teams obviously miss them too. Austin Henry, I mean, he's fun to watch. I got to see him pitch a few times last year, and that fastball up into the 90s, and his curveball's an absolute hammer. They say he spins it at about 3,200 RPM. And then Will Simmons, I mean, that kid can command both sides of the plate, and real good slider that he can move off some barrels, and fun to watch.
Yeah. So we'll try to keep posted on some of the big bats and the big arms that we see, but help us out if you're out in the audience. I mean, we try to go through as many box scores as we can, but let us know if you see any top performers that deserve to be on that list in the coming episodes. Let's finish up with some big upcoming games. And you look at this graphic, and a lot of the big games involve Roosevelt. Roosevelt has Tuesday night against Brandon Valley. Thursday, take on Harrisburg, and Friday, take on Mitchell for another doubleheader. That's quite a stretch here for the Riders.
Yeah, taking a look at this week, Coach DeYoung might want to rethink the scheduling that he did earlier in the year, but no, he's really looking forward to playing some great competition this week. I mean, when you get a chance to go against the number 3, the number 2, and then Mitchell, what are they, 5, or at least in
Basically
the mix
5 or
somewhere.
6, yeah.
But really, really big games tonight against Brandon Valley out at Harmadon. It'll be fun to see how those two teams match up because they're both well coached. They both have a tremendous amount of talent and senior leadership. And it's going to be fun to see how that plays out.
So when you have 5 games like that in 4 days, it really tests the depth of your pitching staff, which I guess, what are the positives and negatives of that, Joel?
Well, it's what you want. That's the whole reason why you schedule that way early in the year. And that's why I said that half tongue in cheek about Coach DeYoung scheduling that way. But because you never, and sometimes you don't ever know exactly who's going to be great. I think they probably had a feeling those would be 3 of the top teams, but that's a great test for your team. That's a great test for your entire pitching staff. It's a great test for your offense. How can we do again? Because they're going to see, probably 1s, 2s, 3s as far as the pitching staffs of Brandon Valley, Harrisburg, and Mitchell. And, it's a chance to really see where they are and, how they match up with 3 of the best teams in the state.
We're looking forward to that. And all those teams will be looking forward to knocking off Roosevelt, who has yet to lose a game. I don't expect they'll get through this week unscathed, but you never know. They've been pulling out the close games so far this year. A couple of Class B games to watch. Howard takes on Madison. Howard, a state tournament team from a year ago who has a lot of players back. They've lost a couple so far this year, and they take on Madison. Of course, geographically, you know about that. That's a fun matchup for people around that area, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that takes me back. It makes me want to reopen the yearbook a little bit and reflect on some of those big games against Gary Graff and Brad Bastian and some of those Madison Bulldogs. We didn't play high school baseball; we played them in Legion every year, but that was always fun. That's a fun matchup, and yeah, Madison has a little bit bigger population and maybe a few more guys to pull from, but I wouldn't count Howard out there. They're a tough team, well coached by Nick Kepsel over there, and they'll be ready for it. That should be a fun one.
Another one I want to highlight is this Platte Geddes Dakota Christian White Lake at Winter Cologne. Both teams so far undefeated in Class B, and this is really a big test for both those two teams who don't, they don't get as many games in as some of the teams from on the east side where they have a lot more to pick from. They've only gotten a few games in so far, so this is a huge test for both those two teams that have a pretty good history of baseball themselves.
Absolutely. Definitely a couple of baseball towns. It'll be fun to see how they match up against each other. And with the Bees, as you said, they just don't play as many games yet. I think that'll pick up a little bit here, but they tend to get a little bit of a later start. And so there's still more to be hashed out in terms of, their top pitchers and how they're going to play their lineups and things like that. But it'll be fun to see how they square up against each other.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. Make sure to tune in. We'll try to do an episode every other week leading up to the state tournaments and do some state tournament previews then. And I appreciate you coming on, Joel.
Absolutely. Just looking forward to more baseball and better weather, and we're good to go.
All right. For Joel Sage, I'm Jason Andera.